So how do you suggest to leaders that they kind of build that trust with
Great
their
question,
teams?
Cyndi. Yeah.
I think it's demonstrating that you care about them. It's
love
not
that.
just telling yourself that you care. It's not telling them that you care. It's actually demonstrating it. And I think this is hard because it gets to the heart of leadership is really about helping people develop so that we all together can do bigger and better things. And different people show up differently. Different people need different things. They're going to, some are gung-ho, tell me what I need to do differently. And other people are, I'm fine just the way I am, thank you very much. And so, it's very difficult. And I tell a story in the book, which really was a huge epiphany for me. And of course, in hindsight, I kind of have to laugh at it. It's like, well, that was so obvious. Why did it take this epiphany? But it was having kids that one of the best lessons I've ever learned about leadership was from having kids. And before having kids, I knew nothing about babies. I had never changed a diaper. And so, when I was taking my first son home, I thought, if they knew how little I know about what I'm about to do, they would not let me leave.
Hi there, and welcome to the HR Podcast. This is Linda Misegadis
and Cyndi Manuel, and we'll be your co-hosts. After spending years working in and with HR, we thought, why not start a podcast to support the important HR community? We believe the way things have always been done isn't necessarily what's going to work in the future. So we're diving into topics that support HR and working women as they navigate the future of work. We're talking about professional growth and also how we can support each other as human beings.
We can't wait to bring you insights from HR experts, thought leaders, and inspiring women who are making a real difference in their organization and communities. They'll share their journeys and tips on balancing work and life in a better way. We're excited to learn alongside you and hope you'll pick up some great takeaways from tips and tricks to worksheets that you can actually use in your daily life. So grab your favorite beverage
or lace up your walking shoes and join us for the HR Her Resources podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Her Resources podcast. I'm here in the studio with my extraordinary co-host, Cyndi Manuel. How are you?
Love it. Thank you very much for saying that. It's a Friday, so I'm doing well. How are you both doing?
Doing good. Fridays are always good. So
absolutely. Yeah.
I totally agree. Well, I am very excited about this episode. We have a special guest in the studio with us today, Margaret Andrews. Margaret is a seasoned executive, academic leader, speaker, and instructor. She has created and teaches a variety of leadership courses and professional and executive programs at Harvard University and is the founder of the Milo Center, MYLO Center, a private leadership development firm. Her clients include Amazon, Citi, Continental, Walmart, Wayfair, and the United Nations. She lives in Brookline, Massachusetts, and we're excited to have her in the studio with us today. How are you, Margaret?
I'm doing well, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, good to have
pleasure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to talk today about inside out leadership, managing yourself to lead others. And Margaret actually has a new book that's going to be coming out, I believe, in September, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. September 16th is launch date.
Woohoo.
Yeah, awesome. How exciting.
Is that what Milo stands for? Manage yourself, lead others?
Yeah, well, kind of. Actually, it's really based on the class that the book is based on called Managing Yourself and Leading Others. So the acronym holds either way.
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, Margaret, your career spans executive leadership, consulting, and teaching at Harvard. How has being a woman shaped your leadership journey, and what unique challenges and opportunities have you encountered along the way?
Oh gosh, how long do we have? So I actually started my career as a CPA in San Francisco. I oftentimes like to say that I have one foot in the business world and one foot in academia, and that's given me a really nice vantage point. So I've been a CPA, I've been a longtime strategy consultant, I've been a marketing exec, and then I ran the MBA program at the MIT Sloan School of Management, ran the management program for the Division of Continuing Ed at Harvard, and have been in, as I say, around management education for a long time. So it's a nice vantage point, being able to see it from both sides. It's been a great career. It's been a varied career. It's been what I'm going to say discontinuous. I made lots of weird, changes, and I think actually in many respects I kind of found my calling by a series of lucky accidents, and it really had to do with one time when I was working as a marketing executive. I got a call from MIT saying, hey, we're redoing our curriculum and we would love to have some alums come and help us with this. So I said, okay, I'll help you. And so anyway, we were meeting at 7:30 in the morning, once a week for a long time. And I stopped by somebody's office after we were finished and just knocked on the door. Somebody I hadn't seen for a long time. We were chatting, and he said, "Oh, so what can I do for you?" And I said, "Oh, nothing. I was just stopping by to say hi and see how you're doing." And he said, "Oh, I thought you were coming about the job." And I said, "What job?" And he said, "We're hiring a new executive director for the MBA program. It's going to be, admissions and student affairs and career development." And I think my eyes just got wider and wider and wider. And I said, "Now I'm here for the job." I said, "Tell me more about this." And he said, "Well, you better hurry." He said, "We've surfaced 10 candidates with a recruiting firm, and we're going to interview them all next week." So I pulled out every stop I could think of. I emailed everybody I knew there, and I said, "I have to be on this list. I have to be on this list." And I was not who they were looking for, but long story short, that's who they got. And it was
awesome.
career changing. Yeah.
I love that.
That's inspiring.
What a story too. Yeah. Sometimes it is just being in the right place at the right time and having that, having those opportunities kind of present themselves along those lines. The networking for sure.
And
I
just
totally
staying
agree,
in touch
Cyndi.
as well. I think that was the other thing, right?
Yes,
absolutely.
It was just fortunate.
No, I think it's good. When we do talk about that, I just think that when I did a look back on my own career, I didn't realize it till I looked at it to say, wow, my whole career has been a series of relationships and network. Every single job I moved from place to place to place, there was a network or a connection that helped me along that. I wouldn't have put that together then, but kind of reflecting back, you're like, oh, wow, it really is such a powerful ecosystem for sure.
It is, yes. And I think what you said is really important. You cannot see that when you're in it.
No.
But when you look back and you see those dots, you absolutely see those connections.
I totally agree. Well, I'm curious, what inspired you to write Manage Yourself to Lead Others? And how do you see this book resonating really with women who aspire to leadership roles? Because we are seeing a big shift. Cyndi and I are watching this happen in a lot of the conversations that we're having and the guests that we have. There's definitely more and more of a shift toward women in leadership, although they still make up a very, very small percentage. But what inspired you to write the book, and how do you hope that resonates?
Yeah. Well, I had a job many years ago where I was doing quite well, getting promotions and things like that, and had a great relationship with my boss. And then that boss left, and I had a new boss. And I did not have anywhere close to that same relationship with this newer boss. And one day, as we're sitting in his office, he says to me, point blank, "You're not very self-aware." And I was very shocked by that and sat in stunned silence as he went on to say I was overly ambitious, demanding, and things like that. And it took me a while to take that in, right? You can imagine the cocktail of emotions that I was feeling in that moment.
Oh, yeah.
Defensive and angry and confused and, all of these kinds of things. But when I later started thinking about it, I realized, I think he's right. And that I could be impatient and demanding and hard charging and these kinds of things. And it could make some people on my team feel kind of anxious or underappreciated. And that was not in any way what I was trying to do. And certainly my relationship with my boss was underperforming substantially. And, I had never put in the effort with that boss to really make it that way. I just sort of expected that, hey, I'm doing great. He's going to support me and he knows how well I've done before he got here, et cetera. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. And so anyway, as I say, it was just absolutely not what I wanted, but here I was. And I thought, well, this is a problem at least partially of my own making. And I want to do something about it. So I started looking into all kinds of places for insights. And so, I looked at famous leaders and people I knew. I looked at academic studies, management books, history, philosophy, psychology, theology, right? Anything I thought could give me a shred of insight was on the list. And it was through this that I found what I think is really the fundamental truth about leadership, and that is that leadership begins within, that, managing ourselves comes before leading others. And so, when I discovered it, it was just sort of all signs were pointing there. And so, I thought, oh, okay, great. And now I have to do it, right? So understanding this is one thing. Doing it is a completely different thing. And it's hard. It's hard because you have to really shine a light inside yourself. And, in truth, there are some things there that we may not like to see or to admit.
How brave!
Well, I don't know if I'd say it was brave, but it was hard. It was very hard. And then once you discover, okay, here's what makes me who I am, and then you have to think about, well, where do I want to be next? What's the next version of me, and then how do I manage myself towards that? So I put a lot of work into it and it paid off. It really did pay off. And so I later created a class on this, a 15-week with lots of readings and papers and all that sort of stuff. And then later, and that class has had a wait list every time it's been offered over the last 18 years. And then we created a 2-day professional program out of it, and it's become the most popular executive program at Harvard. So that's incredible. Where it all came from. But it really started with my own problem and trying to fix my own problem.
I like that.
I think those are the most impactful kinds of trainings and offerings, whether it's a class or training or coaching or what have you, is when you start by looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, here's the journey that I went on. So it's not just something that's, pie in the sky. You actually went through this. You've got, your steps that you took, I'm sure. I know that you've got in your book the 6 questions for self-understanding. Can you maybe share some of that with our community here?
And those were developed over time. I started with a few and morphed them, got rid of some, added others, etc. And really, the whole idea is to try to understand yourself from different perspectives. Different different facets of us. And one thing I'll say is that I know there's a lot of talk about the authentic us or whatever, and I always say, but don't forget we contain multitudes, so there's no one authentic Margaret Andrews. There's no one authentic of you, right? They're different. We show up differently in different situations. And I think that's important to understand. So but when you understand yourself, you understand, oh, this is why this upsets me. Or, oh boy, there's my mom speaking. Or, those kinds of things.
That never happens.
Oh, that was just hypothetical.
But I kind of like it when I channel my mom, but I don't know.
So the first question is it's the biggest question. It's the hardest question. It's the longest one. And I always tell people that my answer to this question is 6 pages of single space type, right? So it's a big question.
Wow.
And that first question is around who and who and whose thinking have influenced you in your life, and therefore how it shows up in your leadership. And this is, of course, your parents and caregivers and siblings and extended family, community, your religion, your college dorm mate. It's classes you took, discussions you had, movies you've watched, books you've read, right? We are influenced by so many things, and we are influenced by people that help us, and we are also influenced by people that hurt us. So it's, and also some people or some books or ideas, whatever, can end up on both sides of the ledger. It may have been some good things and some not so good things. So it's complicated, right? And that's why I say that is the hardest question of them. But spending time to really wrestle with that question helps you answer all the other ones. So that's the first one. And the second one is kind of related to it. And it's about what situations and events have shaped you as a person. And this can be lucky and unlucky accidents. Obvious unlucky ones are, losing a job or getting in a car accident or, breaking your leg before the big ski event or, whatever. But lucky accidents play a role too. It was a very lucky accident when I knocked on that guy's door to say hello, that he was there. Right?
Yes.
So super lucky accident.
Happy accident.
But my favorite one that I hear all the time is that, I really did not want to go to that party, but my friend insisted, and that's where I met my spouse. Right. So super lucky accident, right? That. It was not going to happen if your friend didn't force you. Third area is around, what are your values? What your core values? And I have a couple of different ways of helping people get into those. I ask them, look at your calendar. Your calendar is actually what your enacted values are.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
So we say, I have to do this. It's like, actually, you have more of choice in this, right? Than you think. And the other is I tell people, what makes you mad? Because whatever makes you mad is pointing to a value. It's right because what's making you mad is it's somehow or other violated. Yeah, exactly. And then that fourth question, question is around success. What is your definition of success in both your personal life and your professional life? And most people will tell me something like, well, personal life, I want to have a good relationship with my family and I want to retire with this much money in the bank. And I ask them, well, what's underneath that, right? Why that much? And what do you mean by a good relationship? Or professionally, I want to, be CEO or start a company or whatever it is. And I also say, well, what's behind that? Because a lot of times our definition of success is pointing to a value. So a lot of times it's recognition or it's success or, these kinds of things. And then the fifth one is around how well do you understand your emotions? And I'll say feel your emotions. And I also will say to people, who knows you're mad first? You? Or the person you're with. Because if it's you,
that's a good point.
it's probably you're aware of it. If it's them, maybe not so much.
Probably not.
And and this is hard for a lot of people because they say, I'm not sure. And I say, well, if you're not sure, I think we know.
Yes, that's so true. Yeah.
And then the last question is about feedback and what type of feedback have you gotten in your personal and your professional life over time? Are there common themes or, did things change, as you went up in levels of leadership, et cetera? And what's interesting is very oftentimes the answer to this question around feedback points back to that fifth question about understanding your emotions, because a lot of times our feedback is about how we show up to other people that we are oftentimes not aware about.
These are awesome questions.
They are.
I mean, how frequently would you recommend, Margaret, that people sort of take this inventory and sit with themselves and answer these questions?
Great. I'm so glad you asked that because it's not a one and done, as you probably guessed. I always think, you take a first pass at it and, at a minimum, you should spend between a half hour and 45 minutes on those questions. But then to go back the next day, the next week, the next month, and then kind of I'll say update it, whether it's quarterly or yearly or, whatever your cadence is. Because the thing is that, I tell people when you're first writing your answers to this, do not edit them. Right?
Good point. Yeah.
Just free flow.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let
Yeah.
it just flow from your head down your arm through that pen.
Love that.
And I say you can go back and edit later, but you really actually want to get out those first thoughts because sometimes they're very telling. And then you can go back and you may see things differently. You may say, well, maybe I had some fault in that one too. Maybe it wasn't all their fault. Right? And that's you learning about yourself and looking for patterns.
High emotional intelligence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
I
I would say it's an ongoing process.
Awesome.
Of course, if you start it, you don't have to go back and start over. But you got to start somewhere.
I like that.
And I love the thought of like a baseline that you can then kind of revisit.
Yeah.
And I love your recommendation, Margaret, about don't edit yourself because just let it come out. And you may surprise yourself with some of the things
I like
that you see.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the other part of editing is to put it in words or phrases that were supposed to be, right? Yes, with those air quotes. Right? And it's just like, no, but that's really not the way it was. So, yeah.
No judgment. Yeah, this is just
I like
how
that.
I feel.
No, I think that's really, well, and I love what you said about the authenticity side of it as well, because that has been such a buzz for the last few years now is really like our authentic self. But I like what you said about that because I've always struggled a little bit conceptually with it because I'm like, well, to your point, I'm not the same person I am at work, but not because I'm being inauthentic at work. It's just that I'm going to be different around the people that I love or my friends and things that are it's going to look and feel differently than maybe how I am with the people that I'm working with. And that doesn't make that any less authentic. And I hope that I'm different with those people than I am with the people that I love. And so it has been an interesting dynamic to me as we've talked about authenticity and bringing your authentic self to work. And I feel like that became a catch-all for a lot of different problems we were dealing with. And so we threw it all in the authenticity bucket, right? Where if you start unpacking that, there's so much more to that conversation than bringing your authentic self. So I love what you said there.
And I think it's sometimes one of those words that is used so much and by so many people that it loses its meaning because we all have our own definition. And so therefore, well, what does it really mean?
That is such a good point.
And, Margaret, it's used so frequently when we talk about building trust, with leaders in particular. And I know that's another topic that you discuss in your book. And so how do you suggest to leaders that they kind of build that trust with
Great
their
question,
teams?
Cyndi. Yeah.
I think it's demonstrating that you care about them. It's not just telling yourself that you care. It's not telling them that you care. It's actually demonstrating it. And I think this is hard because it gets to the heart of leadership is really about helping people develop so that we all together can do bigger and better things. And different people show up differently. Different people need different things. They're going to, some are gung-ho, tell me what I need to do differently. And other people are, I'm fine just the way I am. Thank you very much. And so, it's very difficult. And I tell a story in the book, which really was a huge epiphany for me. And of course, in hindsight, I kind of have to laugh at it. It's like, well, that was so obvious. Why did it take this epiphany? But it was having kids that one of the best lessons I've ever learned about leadership was from having kids. And, before having kids, I knew nothing about babies. I had never changed a diaper. And so, when I was taking my first son home, I thought, if they knew how little I know about what I'm about to do, they would not let me leave, right? It would be child endangerment. And
you didn't read that book, What to Do When You're expecting
Exactly.
it, like,
Yeah, I did read that, but I
As
still
if.
knew nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But you had
Didn't help.
to learn everything, and it wasn't just about changing diapers and feeding and bathing and all that sort of stuff. I had to learn him. I had to learn about what
Right.
this cry meant
Yeah.
and what that cry meant, and what that
Yes.
giggle meant, and his moods and those kinds of things. So then when I had my second son, I thought, oh, cool. Now, now I know something.
Right. I got it all down
I got it all
pat.
down.
Yeah, I already did
And,
this. Yeah.
So,
No.
nope, that was not true. And, I had to learn
No.
about him as a distinct individual with his own likes and
Right.
dislikes and stuff. And then again, when my daughter came along, I'm like, okay, third time's a charm, but
Right. Yep.
no.
No.
So, and that is when it dawned on me that, my
Yeah.
gosh, my own kids, my own genetic material is not similar. Why
so true.
would I ever
Yeah.
expect
Yeah.
this random collection of strangers at work to behave and think the same way if my own genetic material doesn't? And I thought,
Right.
wow,
I love that.
why did it take all that time and effort to figure
Right.
that out?
Yeah.
Such a great analogy. And I don't know how old your kids are, Margaret, but I've got a 37-year-old and a 21-year-old. So I always said I had two only children. And same as you, like, I even thought with our daughter, I got this
Yes.
down. Number one, like, very, very different human beings. And I love them both because they are so
Yes.
different. But I love the analogy
Yeah.
of that. Like, honor people's differences and don't expect everybody to be this cookie cutter, type of team member.
Right.
And really be curious about how you can support each person
Yeah,
individually.
absolutely.
When I think in a leadership role, it is, I'm not going to imply it's easy, but it's easier for the leader to adapt to the different personalities and styles of the people that work for than to expect all of those people to adapt to who you are as a leader. So expecting all of them to change how they react and how they maybe their communication styles and what makes them tick, expecting all of them to conform to you as the leader is unrealistic any more than it would be expecting
True.
our children to behave the same way. They have different relationships with moms and dads and even with those parents. And so it is kind of incumbent upon that leader to learn those different things about the people that they lead so that they can adapt and really be that, really support the people who work underneath them. So.
Actually, I really appreciate what you said because I think it's very important. Another part of that, which is that sometimes it's incumbent upon us as the leader to adapt because so often we think, well, I'm the boss, they should do it my way. And I'll never forget, there was a time in class where I don't even remember what we were talking about, but this one woman said, I am an extrovert. And she said, my right-hand person is an introvert. And she said, we work in one of these open offices where we're literally at benches, and so she is right behind me. So she said, I used to always, every time I'd have an idea, I'd turn around and I'd say, hey, what do you think about this? And she said, then I realized, so we'd have this discussion and then, now I can't remember her name, would go off and think about it and then come back to me with different thoughts. And that's when she said, I realized, I'm an extrovert. She's an introvert. So she said, I tried something different. She said, I DM'd her and I said, hey, I have this idea about blank. Can we talk, this afternoon?
Okay.
And she said,
Nice.
It worked so beautifully because then the other person had a chance to think about it. But what was so great about this story was that in the class where this woman told the story, somebody raised their hand and said, wait a minute, you're the boss. She should, adapt her style to yours. And then this woman said the best thing ever. She said, no, my job is to get the best out of the people that work for me. And she said, if it just takes this small little thing, me typing instead of turning around, she said, I'm absolutely going to do that. And I thought, oh, that was great. It was it's just a great example of what you just said.
At the Delta Principle, we are transforming the way you experience change. Have you ever experienced an organizational change where your employees pushed back because it was too much, too fast, or they just didn't understand why they couldn't do things the way they've always done them? What about where communication was non-existent or unorganized, with important updates getting lost in the shuffle, leaving people confused? And have you ever experienced change where morale was at an all-time low because the change felt overwhelming and not aligned with your organization's culture? If you are being asked to lead an important organizational change, especially if you're new to leading change, or if you're just feeling overwhelmed, the Delta Principle is here to support you. We work closely with you as a trusted partner, co-creating real-world solutions to address your unique challenges, and we equip you and your organization for future success. Are you gearing up for your next transformation journey or exploring ways to strengthen your change management skills? Then let's connect. This year, we're thrilled to introduce Leading Change, a training designed for leaders driving organizational initiatives, and Navigating Change, a training tailored to empower teams and adapting to change with confidence. Our coaching and training sessions are fully customizable to meet your organization's unique needs. Reach out today to see how we can partner with you to make your next change a success. You can find us on LinkedIn or by emailing us at info@thedeltaprinciple.com.
Margaret, I'm curious in your class and as you wrote the book and as you developed, because when you were telling your story, the first thought that I had was I immediately thought, well, you had a male boss and you're a female, and would he be having that same conversation with a man who had the same characteristics as what you were describing? I'm curious, did you find in all of that there was inherent bias, or was it more just that we've kind of been programmed a little bit to just automatically assume, well, if I was a man, he wouldn't say those things to me, but I'm a woman, and so he views it. I'm just curious, what have you seen in all of that?
So the real answer is I'll never know, right?
Okay. But, fair enough,
but,
yes.
You can imagine that I asked myself that question many times.
Yeah.
But I will say, so I don't know, but I did a project several years ago, and it was about, it was for an organization, and they wanted to look at, how could they help women advance, it happens everywhere, right? They weren't advancing at the same rate, and yet they knew that they were just as good, so what was going on? And the big key finding of that was that women were not getting ongoing helpful feedback. That was the big takeaway.
Okay.
And so when I would ask people, how do you give feedback, et cetera? And I will never forget this one man, but what he said, I think, was what a lot of other people were trying to say but didn't have the right words. And he said, I struggle with giving direct feedback to some of my female employees. And I said, why? Okay. And he said, I'm afraid they're going to cry. And
interesting.
And I said, at first I thought, well, so what if they cry, right? But I thought, oh, okay, I get it. He gets it, but he doesn't know how to do this.
And he doesn't want to put them in a bad spot where they feel like they're going to cry.
And maybe that, and also very oftentimes it's because we're uncomfortable that somebody's crying in front of us.
Yes.
So there's all of this going on. But it is pretty well documented that women don't get the direct feedback that men often do get.
Really
and of course, this is based on research and things like that, but it doesn't mean every woman doesn't, right? It means some do. But as a trend, that is true.
That's interesting.
So that might be why too, if I'm thinking about your story again, it felt kind of like in the moment, oh my gosh, all the different thoughts and emotions are coming up for you when you get this feedback that you weren't anticipating, because we're not used to getting that feedback.
Right.
I think even with each other, we're
Cyndi.
kind of gentle, right?
Well, and I think too that, if sometimes, and I'm sure we've all had some form of this, is that you might have some relationship, a personal or a professional relationship, and somebody's doing something that's not quite right, but you think, oh, I don't want to make a big deal of this, right? It's not that bad.
Yes.
But the truth is that it grates on you over time, and if you don't deal with it when it's small, then you have an episode and it gets bigger. And so
Right.
I think, that's one of those things that as uncomfortable as a conversation as it may be, it's so much easier if you do it when it's small than letting it
Yeah.
fester.
Mm-hmm.
Such a good point.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when we think about, so for our HR audience out there, Margaret, are there ways that our HR professionals could maybe take the concepts of the Milo and what you put in the book and maybe apply that into leadership programs? Because oftentimes, like I know
Good
I've done a
question.
couple leadership programs and some have been really good and others, but what you just described and that worksheet and that approach and what you're doing, I'm like, wow, it's just so
Yeah.
it's fundamental, but it's complex, right? Surface. It looks, it's 6 questions, but those 6 questions pack so much power behind them when you start digging in. I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts around HR maybe being able to leverage some of those concepts and that you're teaching and that you're writing about to maybe help in the leadership programs that they might be looking at in their organizations?
Yeah. So I think, well, gosh, so many things. One is that I think a lot of leadership training, wherever it is done, focuses so much on, running an effective meeting, KPIs, these things, which are sort of these external things.
Right.
But don't start with the internal. And I'll never forget one time I was doing a 2-day program and one guy came up to me at the end of the first day and he said, well, when are we going to talk about leadership? And I said, we have been the whole time. Because we weren't talking about, other people.
Yes.
And so I think that if we help people understand themselves, it helps them to manage themselves. It helps them to put themselves where they're going to grow. It helps,
Right.
it helps. But I think a lot of times there's such a rush to be productive. Or to be efficient. And I oftentimes will say to people that, efficiency and effectiveness are not the same thing. You can be efficient and not effective, and effectiveness sometimes is not efficient. So to me, understanding yourself and helping other people understand themselves is a long-term game, that it is an investment in that person. And I know the way that, so many organizations work, we don't know how long we're going to have these people. And it always makes me think of that old joke of, oh my gosh, what if we invest all this money in these people and they leave?
Right.
And the other person says, yeah, but what if we don't and they stay?
There you go.
Yes.
And my thought is, invest in them. Invest in and the other is that if you invest in people, it will always pay dividends. There's a story in the book about somebody that I know very well and have known for a long time. And, she was always known as a great manager, right? She, she grew people, she developed them. And when they were, when they hit their peak with her, she'd try to help them find something else, whether it was in that organization or not. And and also people used to go and use her team as hunting ground for, and I asked her one time, doesn't it bug you that you spend all this time investing in these people and then, somebody takes them away from you? And she looked at me and she said, oh no, she said, you are looking at this all wrong. She said, I have friends everywhere. She said, because those people that I help really appreciate it. She said, I can pick up the phone in the organization and get a roadblock removed in a nanosecond. And she said, I can do that externally too. And I thought, wow.
What a good view.
She just had such a great way of thinking about it. It's never wasted. Kindness is never wasted. It's really an investment.
I like that.
Margaret, I have a question for you. What do you think is the difference? Because I always get asked this. What do you think is the difference between a manager
Great
Yeah.
question,
It's so
Cynthia.
funny. To be honest, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Okay.
I in general, I think that it's kind of, if I were to say it, it's probably a sliding scale. It's more about what is needed in that context. I think that we need leadership when things are very uncertain, when things are in turmoil or change, or we don't know the answer. And
Yeah.
so I think it's not a position. I've seen some of the best leadership from the youngest, least experienced person on the team. So I think I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. I just think that people step into what's needed.
Great point. Yeah.
Yeah, I love
No,
that.
that is a really good question and a great answer. How do you see like great leaders developing each other? Because that also, it's creating a peer circle and maybe helping, but how can leaders help support each other?
Oh, yeah. I think that, well, it depends. Within an organization, if it's a very competitive organization, internal
Yes.
competition, I don't think you'll see that much, because in those types of organizations, if I help you, it comes at my expense. So why would I do
Right.
that, right? If
Yeah.
I'm an ambitious person,
Yeah.
that's probably not where I'm going to put my effort. And that's sad because,
Yeah.
we could help each other a lot. But I worked for an organization, a consulting firm, and I always thought that they really did HR very, very well, that they really wanted you to have friends at work, right? Because we worked crazy hours and had all kinds of extreme
Right.
situations. And, it was just somebody that you could talk to and you could be
Yeah.
honest with and things like that. And it
Be
was
real.
not internally competitive. And I think that was one of the reasons why it
Oh,
worked so well.
that's a really great point.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely like that.
It's a differentiator.
Definitely a differentiator in an organization. One of the questions I have for you as well is around culture, which you kind of leaned in a little bit there as far as culture. What do you think is the difference between culture makers and culture takers?
Yeah. So the idea between a culture taker and a culture maker is who can change culture. So it's one time I was explaining it to a group and somebody said, "Oh, I get it now. People don't change the culture. They're culture takers because they're lazy." And I said, "Oh no, that's not what I meant at all." And so I always now want to preface it by saying it doesn't mean that person is lazy or incompetent. It means that they don't have access to things. So essentially, most of us, and I'm talking right now about very large organizations, the vast majority of us are culture takers, which means that we join an organization and we are joining a culture. And so we are expected to adapt. A culture maker is somebody who can actually make the culture or change the culture. And so when you think about how does culture evolve, it starts with the whoever founded the company. And I always say, hey, listen, if the founder of a company is a dog lover, it's probably a dog friendly organization.
Right.
And if they were bitten by a dog when they were 3 and terrified of dogs, it is not. And it was so funny because I've said this for years, and just within the last 6 months, I was in Amazon's second headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. And I walk in and there is a big framed photograph of a dog. And I'm like, whoa, I think this is a cultural artifact. So before I could ask the question, we went through the lobby and we were, going around the building, and I see going up the staircase that there's a whole bunch of dog portraits. And so I asked him, I said, okay, you got to tell me what is going on here. And they said, oh, the one framed that you saw, that's Rufus. And they said that was Jeff Bezos's dog. And so
Oh my
Rufus would come
goodness.
into the office, etc. And they said, all those others are dogs of the people that work here, right? And I just thought, oh, that's such a
I
great
love
cultural
that.
artifact, right? But it
Yes.
proved that point that, the founder
Absolutely.
is, and now,
Yeah.
the whole company is that way, even though Bezos
Such a
is
great
is
point.
gone.
Yeah, you have a story behind
Yeah.
that. I love
Well,
that.
and now I
Yeah.
understand why the little AI in Amazon is called Rufus.
Yes.
I wondered how they came up with that name, and now
Yeah.
you just have
How funny.
ding,
Yeah,
ding.
yeah. And now you know, right? Dog-friendly
That's
culture. Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, that is great. I really like that. And that's a great way to look at it too, because not everybody is a culture maker, right? I do think that there is kind of that certain set, and it probably does start at either a founder level or maybe a new CEO coming in and trying to do that. But like me, Linda is not going to necessarily come in and make the culture of the company that I work at today. I'm going to either adapt and adjust to the culture within, or not. And so I really like that the difference that you described there.
Yeah. Well, and I think, it has to do with who has, I would say to change a culture takes access and power over a
Yes.
lot of levers.
So true.
Right? It's
Yeah.
like who sets the
Mhm.
strategy, who says who is hired, where we hire them from, what skills we look at, how do we train people, what do we promote, how are things organized, how is work done, right? We could go on down
Right.
this list. And those are the levers of culture. And that is why most of us in organizations are not in a position to change the
Yeah.
culture of an organization because we don't have the power over those levers. So, I'll reiterate, it's not because we're lazy, right? It's
Right.
it's because we don't have access to those. Again, I'm speaking about larger organizations, and of course, organizations have subcultures. The
Right.
marketing department has a different
Yes.
culture than the R&D department does.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
makes sense.
I was thinking
But there's
that
also
too, yeah.
very oftentimes an organizational culture, but there can be subcultures too.
That is a good point for sure. What advice do you give for bouncing back when you've had like those setbacks? Because you could have taken that feedback and that could have set you back quite a bit. It could have taken you a whole different path than what it took to where you ended up on this journey that you've been on. How do you recommend, like, how do you deal with being able to hear that feedback or to have those setbacks? What recommendation do you have for kind of building that resilience and bouncing back and finding that path forward?
Yeah. So, I mean, resilience really is about, how do you bounce back or sometimes even bounce forward, right? But I think, one of the first things is to accept what just happened, whatever it was, figure out what is the reality here, as I say, what just happened, who was impacted, what was my role, right? All of these
Yeah.
awful questions that you
Yes.
don't really want to go
Right.
into. Right,
Take
but I
ownership.
say,
Yeah.
don't deny it and don't catastrophize it, right? That,
Oh, I like
just
Mm.
look at, factually what just happened. And then
Yeah.
I would say, process those emotions. Have yourself a good cry or two
Yeah.
or three,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes just free writing, expressive writing can be very helpful. You can just write out your anger or your embarrassment, your shame, your whatever it is that you're
Yeah.
feeling. Because, one of the things you want to do is to process those emotions. And very oftentimes people try to suppress them, but that
Mhm.
doesn't work, right? It works in the
Right.
moment, but boy, they keep coming up and they're building as they go. And
Right.
then they come out unexpectedly and incorrectly. So I say, as soon as you can, start processing those emotions, go for a run, dance yourself crazy, go for a walk in nature, whatever it is that you need. So those
Right.
are two of the foundational things. And then, what the other is to just kind of look and see, okay, well, I'm in this situation now, whatever it is, what might that mean now? Maybe it's not the end of the road. Maybe it's a fork in the road, right? There was a great story that somebody told me about how he started his company and it was, doing well and they were going to sell it. And he got a call from his co-founder and it said, it said, the money hasn't hit the bank yet. And so what they didn't know was this was the day that Lehman Brothers crashed. And the whole market was imploding.
Yes.
And that was why. So he said it was just like the worst period of his life, that they were going to sell. It couldn't. And they ended up having to sell it like a fire sale price later. And everything just was wrong. And he said, he just felt punched in the gut like he'd never been. But he said, as he started to process it, he realized, I was never really intent on that industry. He said, I just kind of happened into it. It was, not a lucky accident, but, but he said, I don't really have a strong affinity for that industry. And he said, I do, though, for health and education. And he said, okay, my next startup is going to be in one of those too. Well, anyway, he now runs the biggest, most profitable ed tech company in, I think, the world. If the world, he's probably in the top 10. But but it was, what he said was, he just felt so kicked in the gut. But he, he processed all that sort of stuff. But he did a lot of internal work and said, hey, wait a minute, there's an opportunity in this muck. Right. He took that.
That's so good.
But I think the other thing too is, I would say, focus only on what you can control, because there's lots of things that are outside of your control. Right. So don't spend a shred of brain power on that, as hard as that is. Right. And then, just figure out, what can I do? If somebody I know who was going through a really rough period said, a good day is when I take a shower. And I thought, and that's under your control. That's a win.
That's a win.
Yeah. No, I love that. What would you like to leave our listeners with? Like, what are you, as you wrote this book and the classes that you teach, what are you hoping to kind of leave everyone with? Because I'm sure there was purpose behind why you did all of that. So what do you hope to leave?
I would hope to leave the world a better place by improving the craft of leadership, even a little bit. Because if you think about it, I mean, if we just take the world of work, we spend a lot of time at work, and we spend a lot of time outside of work thinking about work. And if you've ever had a really bad boss, you know that it can ruin the rest of your life. Right? You're thinking about it all the time, and not in a positive way. And yet when you have a really great boss, when you think about work when you're not at work, it's a good thing. It's energizing.
So true.
Right? And so my thought is, gosh, if we could just shift that, percentage just a little bit, how much better the world would be. Wow. And it's actually not that hard to do. Right. Well, I should say it's not that complicated. It can be hard.
There you go. Yes. Not that complicated, but can be hard. Yeah.
So that would be my hope. Yeah. And that's really why I started teaching the class. That's why I ultimately wrote the book.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
That's so cool.
I really love
How
that.
can people connect with you, Margaret, if they want to?
Pretty much the one and only social media I use is LinkedIn, and I am Margaret C. Andrews. Awesome. It turns out that there are lots of Margaret Andrews. There's several Margaret C. Andrews. There's actually 2 Margaret Andrews at Harvard, believe it or not.
Really?
Oh,
wow.
Yeah. And the other one's in the classics department, so I know when somebody's sending me her email by mistake.
Sure.
But and then also they can find me through my website, which is margaretandrews.com.
Wonderful. Awesome. We'll put all of that out. And of course, now your book is coming out September 16th. Where can people get your book?
Pretty much anywhere books are sold, bookshop.org, hopefully your local bookstore, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, lots of different places.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put the link out there, and we'll make sure that everybody knows how to get to you and also get to the book. But we have so enjoyed having you on the show today, Margaret. I love just the perspective that you put on everything. Sometimes you talk to people and it feels very academic, and I don't feel like you brought this from an academic perspective, a lot of academia behind it, but you made it so simple. Like anybody can pick this up. Anyone can take those 6 questions and really apply that to what they're doing today, and they're gonna be better because of it. So thank you for everything that you've done. I really, it's been great.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing your stories, and especially the story about you and the feedback that you received.
Absolutely.
I think we can all put ourselves in that spot at one point or another.
Absolutely.
It's really awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cyndi, as always, for being here.
You too, Linda.
And thanks to all of our listeners. And we hope that you like this episode as much as we did. And if you did, make sure that you like, share, comment.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the HR Her Resources podcast. We're so happy to have you with us on this journey. Music and production by Logan Misegadis of LJM Productions. We'd also like to thank our intern, Lauren Banas, for creating our logo and supporting our social media postings. If you'd like to connect with Logan or Lauren, you can find their information in the show notes. If you found value in our discussion and think someone else might as well, please follow, subscribe to our LinkedIn, and share with a friend. Until our next episode, please take care and continue to support one another.